I want to get on to our three-time bestseller, AIM Leadership Conference international speaker, Deanne Turner. Deanne, welcome back to the program. We're so happy to have you and feel very grateful and blessed to have you as part of our program and a friend of AIM Employers Association. How have you been since we've talked to you last?
Oh, doing great, Phil. It's just such a pleasure to be back with you and your members. And, uh, it's always Truett Cathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A, used to always say, he said, it's one thing to get invited one time to speak to a group, but if you get invited back the second time, that's a real honor. So I feel
Well,
really honored to be back with you. Thank you.
Well, we get great feedback on the wisdom that you share, and I know pre-show you and I were talking about just lessons and how we end up where we're at in life. And what I'd like to do is dig into some of the conversation we were having pre-show, and maybe talk a little bit about in your experience, what is the workforce looking for from an employer today? I know you've been doing some research and work in this area. Would love to get some of your insight on that. We've been talking a lot about retention in the workforce. And I think it's just a great question that plays on the back of our retention efforts that so many are trying to achieve.
Well, my first experience and research comes from raising two millennials and a Gen Z, young millennials and a Gen Z. So I've had lots of firsthand experience. And the funny thing is, when they become adults, you go from being so much of that parent into coach. And I can say that's my number one career coaching assignment right now, is with the three of those young men. Also, I serve High Point University as one of their executives in residence around talent acquisition. So, and my third book, Crush Your Career, has put me on lots of college campuses and with lots of young people young in their career. And what I've come to conclude is this, and this is backed up by research as well, but this is also, I fully believe this from my observation. What we try to do as organizations is we're trying to do 80 different things. Even as I look at the answers coming into what do you think about Gen Z, and you see it's all over the place. And we're trying to do 80 different things, whether it's bring your dog to work day, or it's Friday afternoon happy hours, or all kinds of things that we're calling culture. We're trying to figure out what it is that they want in their work. I think they're just three things. If you do
All right.
these three things, I think they cover the 90% of the issues. So number one, and we can break these down. I'm going to tell you what all three are, and then we can break them down as you want to. Number one is they want to be a part of a remarkable culture. And I'd love to talk about what that means. Secondly, they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. Interesting thing about this generation, people talk about, oh, they don't work as hard and all this. That's not true. They'll work very hard for you if it's something they believe in, if it's something they feel like matters, versus just to make money for themselves or someone else. And then thirdly, and I actually think this is most important to our younger millennials, maybe even older millennials, but our millennials and our Gen Z, which is most of what we're hiring now in our organizations, they want a leader who will invest in them both professionally and personally in their development. So it's those three things that these two generations are really looking for
So
as they
where
look
does
for a
pet
job and why they
insurance
study.
come from? Where's pet insurance fit into this? Like I'm
It,
talking, they're like, well, we offer pet insurance and that's help. And it's like, I'm with you, Dan. I'm like, okay, I don't think it's about pet insurance at all. It might be something you want to do, but it's not where we want to focus our attention and energy. Let's get back to remarkable culture. You mentioned that we can
sure.
get into that. I'd like to dig into that one a little bit deeper. What does
Sure.
that mean when you say that?
Well, you're gonna notice that I like things in threes. I think that was from my mentor at Chick-fil-A. But anyway, I think there are three things there that you're really focused on, and possibly four. I'll tell you what the fourth one is. But the first one is a meaningful purpose, and so that kind of plays into that second thing about being a part of something bigger than yourself. That answers that question. The purpose answers the why question. Why do we exist? So they want
Yes.
to be a part of something that matters. Secondly, and I think this is really important for this Gen Z. I'm having a hard time with that word today. And it's early, I guess. But they want a challenging mission. They want to be a part of something that a big goal, a big, hairy, audacious goal, if you will, to achieve. And
Yeah.
they want to be challenged by that. This is a talented generation, and they want big goals to achieve. And then the third part of a remarkable culture is demonstrated core values. And you notice I use the word demonstrated, and that starts from the leaders, the ones that are on this call, all throughout the organization, because they're not demonstrated by leadership and they're just put on a screensaver or hung in a conference room. They don't mean a whole lot. So those are the three elements that make up a remarkable culture. And you might have some other things that come into that, some of the behaviors we mentioned earlier, but these are the things that matter. And even the conversation about the culture, how to communicate the culture value proposition to potential employees that you asked for a poll on. And it's interesting, of all the things I read there, and I guess word of mouth kind of plays into it when I look at that. But that's going to come back again to leadership. And that's why I'm so glad that our organizations are spending more time in person than virtually, because that has to be caught, not just taught. And it's caught by spending time with the organization and really seeing what goes on and what leadership demonstrates.
Those are fantastic. I'm aligned 100% with everything you just said. And one of the things that I continue to emphasize to organization is, obviously it starts at the top and it starts with leadership, but having extremely effective like managers and supervisors, those people who are in conversation with the direct workforce in the masses, because they're the reflection of the leader when it comes to that. So I may not get exposure to the leader frequently, and I might see and hear the dream or the vision when you start talking about something bigger than yourself, but being able to pass that down throughout the organization so it's caught. I really like that one, and not taught. We talked a little bit about mentoring and those types of things, and maybe employees staying for 2 or 3 years in the workplace. How or why is that important in your mind?
Well, that is what's kind of expected out of this generation now. So they're only going to be in a job a couple of years. And so if you get 5 years out of them, you really accomplish something. So how do you do that? Well, one of the most important pieces is that mentoring piece, that investing in them personally and professionally. So let me talk about that for a moment. I was working with an organization last week. It's a nonprofit, and they hire licensed professionals, licensed counselors for their organization. And they're having a hard time finding them. And so I asked them what they were offering, and they were talking about, and they said, one of the things we tell them is they get free housing. I said, free housing at a nonprofit so for confidentiality reasons, I'm not saying a whole lot, but it's a residential situation. And, these people want to be free. They want to be free to do what they want to do. And all of a sudden, free housing feels confining. I'm going to live here. Now, it might be okay. It might be a neutral, but it's not the thing to sell. What you want to sell to this group is what they need to get their full licensing is they have to have mentors. So
Hey,
instead of
Dan,
worrying
after
about
this, I got to get the name. I got some kids that might need some free housing. I can tell you that now. So afterward, when we're off air, you can help me out.
well, it might be a plus, but what they really want is this investment of leadership into their
Yes.
professional growth. Okay, I want to talk about personal too. I'm going to come back to that. But this professional growth, they want this leadership to invest in them. So that's what I was telling them. You've got to play that up. You've got to have a mentor for each one of these people, and it has to be a set program. And then you end up keeping people longer, because we know the reason that people leave or stay for an organization, the number one reason is the effectiveness of their leader.
Right.
And so that can help. Let's talk about this investing personally, because I saw this pop up in the poll on the wordgram of the things that describe this generation: anxious. Now, that's a good example of investing. If you can help somebody be less anxious, you can work on that about them personally. How much more effective will they be in their job and a future effective leader? Just to work on that one issue, when you identify that, in one of your team members. So, and that's life-changing. That's transformational when you decide to invest in helping somebody in that way. So
Yeah,
that's,
if I
go
can
ahead.
cut you off, because I love that you went into the polls. I just went and looked at it ourselves, and the leading response in that word cloud was entitled, right? That's the reception that sometimes my generation will feel, oh, they're entitled. But I don't really believe they are entitled at all. Do you have any perspective on how maybe we should interpret the message of entitled?
Well, I think that part of it is that it's really it's kind of a strange juxtaposition of this generation, because on one hand, I think they're incredibly resilient. You know, they came about during 9/11. They went through watching their parents go through the financial crisis in 2008. Then they went to college during COVID. I mean, we could go on and on about this generation and what they endured. So on one hand, they're really resilient. And then they're called entitled because they haven't struggled as much from a job perspective. From the time they turned 16, they had the opportunity to have any job because there was such a shortage of hourly workers. As they've gone into the workforce, most of them, if they wanted a job when they came out of college, they didn't have a hard time finding them. When I came out in the mid 80s, it was a problem.
Right. Yeah.
But they're not having that problem. So that appears, I think that's what appears as entitlement. They haven't really struggled. I think it's going to be pretty interesting what's going on right now. The tech sector, the banking sector, the layoffs that are occurring like they've not seen since they entered the workforce. Let me say one more thing about this generation while we're on this wordgram and talking about this. The other thing I notice about them, I mean, I love the word hope, because I have a lot of hope in this generation because they're so resilient and because they're so smart. And one of the things that sometimes people say, and I don't see that here, but sometimes they say, oh, they don't work very hard, or they're not hard workers, or they don't work as long as we baby boomers did. Well, if they worked as long as we did, there'd be something wrong, because they have tools that we didn't have. They can get things done faster than we did them. And so they do have that balance that we didn't have, but they have the tools to make work faster. So that's kind of how I view that.
Yeah, and I do. I always find it comical, and I laugh even at myself. And I maybe speak out of both sides of my mouth when I'm talking with my own children. And I, like you, I have millennials and Gen Z, and I'm like, you got to work hard. You need to have a second job. Like I'll say these things, and at the same time, I'm like, hey, keep a balance. Life is a lot more important than all of. And I'm sure they're spinning their heads, going which way. And I'm really trying to say, give it 100%. And I believe they do. I haven't worked with any of the millennials or Gen Zs today that really aren't giving it 100%. It just looks different than the way I did it.
Right.
And it's really recognizing, I think you said that really well, they go about getting to the solution differently, and maybe sometimes more smartly than I did. Like I went home with Chat GPT, and I was like, hey, check this out. Isn't it so cool? And they're like, oh yeah, Dad, that's no big deal. Right. It's like, it's just, and I was so excited. And they just were like, that's everyday stuff, Dad. Where you been?
Yeah. I had the same experience.
All right, Dan, tell us real quick. You always like to give things away. I know you're trying to help people all the time. And you have a special gift for people if they would visit your website. How can they maybe take advantage of the gift you want to give them?
Sure. You'll go to deannturner.com, DEEANN Turner.com. You can download my top 25 behavioral interviewing questions. Some will apply for the jobs that you have available, some won't. But hopefully it'll be a great start for you. I not only tell you the question, but I actually give you an idea of the answers you're looking for and why. So I hope you'll find that helpful. Yes, you'll have to give me your email address, but the nice thing is I don't send many emails. In fact, the last one was March 23rd, 2023. So I am due for my annual email, but you won't get a bunch from me. So thanks so much.
That in and of itself is impressive.
That's right. That's right. But that's a great gift. I can tell you, I've seen the questions. I have not seen the answer. So I'm going to go on and get those myself because I think we can ask the right question, but if we're not listening for the right answer, that equally is as important as well. Dan, it's been a pleasure to visit with you, and with our members, getting a chance to hear from you and hear the success you're having with your third book. And I know if they want to reach you, they can do so by going to your website. They can download the interview questions.